All right, everyone, welcome to the show. We are started. Jeff, how are you doing?
Good. Now, is this considered a theory of anything, or is it just a one-off stream?
I was going to ask you that too. I feel like we, after the retrospective, we did this big heartfelt sign off and everything. So I feel bad if we were to call this theory of anything. I didn't play the intro and I didn't title this as theory of anything. This is just
Fair enough.
This is just conspiracy discussion with Jeff.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe like every couple of months, we'll just start a new show and then have a really heartfelt last one ever. Yeah, what's new in your neck of the woods?
I've been going to church.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is it a, you've been kind of more involved with the Orthodox thing, right?
Yeah. So it's an Orthodox church. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's, it's been really nice. Highly recommend.
Just a second. What are we going to discuss today?
Something that I'm just learning about in the last 24 hours, but something really interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm a little bit nervous about how we're going to approach this because it's so large, such a large and theoretical concept.
Yeah. And maybe some of the things don't necessarily have to tie in, but they seem like they do, I guess.
Right.
There seems to be a link between. So there seems to be a link between the Travis Scott fatal concert incident and some of these, let's say, supposed. We can't really confirm them, but supposed findings about the chemical composition of the jab.
Right.
And one of those things being graphene oxide and the chemical properties of graphene oxide.
Right. We're definitely going to have to dance around this a little bit. This is going to be one of, I guess I'll explain a little bit where I'm coming from before that. First of all, I was recently verified on Gab by the CEO of Gab, Andrew Torba himself. And that was an exciting thing for me because, through discussing some of the things that we've discussed, it's just sort of like the censorship net is closing in further and further and further. And, I've received strikes on this YouTube channel and even on videos that were once safe, no longer are. Like I put all of my videos privated. And then if people requested to watch a certain video that they remembered, I would usually unlist it and send them the link. And once I started to do that, even by just the act of putting something as unlisted, I would get strikes. So, the YouTube algorithm or the censorship algorithm is like getting tighter and tighter. So I've been looking to, find other places to upload these videos and everything. And I think I've kind of found my home at Gab, and it feels really nice to sort of be appreciated there in that sense. And a whole new circle of people got to see my Lego video, which was really exciting.
Nice.
Yeah, that was really cool. It's prompted me to want to make another one on another analysis on the Free Guy movie because it's very similar. And then, in the stream links in the bottom where you can see my stream links, you can still see an archive of some of my previous stuff that people can look into if they want to. But yeah, I'm definitely, with all of this censorship that's going on, I'm really nervous to talk about this because, quite frankly, I don't know how we're going to approach these topics without just the channel getting axed.
Yeah, we probably already set off something.
Right, potentially.
That YouTube, it's a thing that reads your speech and then creates closed captions for you.
Right.
That thing is, it seems to have taken a great leap forward.
Yes.
Recently, yeah. Mm-hmm. And those closed captions come up right after you upload the video now. So
I think it's basically in real time.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder, like, if I were to just say like Hitler, 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 how long before I wouldn't have a YouTube channel? Well, I guess that's not the thing that it would censor on the basis on. It's all medical misinformation. Like the only times I've run into issues are surrounding, they accuse me of saying things contrary to the World Health Organization. Even if whatever. Even if that's not the case, even if I'm not even really discussing things that, even if I'm not outright disputing any claims, for me to ask rhetorical questions or for me to entertain certain ideas, the algorithm can't tell the difference. So anyway, I don't know how we're going to make it through this one. If on the fly we manage to think of replacement words, maybe we should or can. I don't know. It's likely that we'll live stream this, and anyone who's in here watching it, you get to see it, and maybe there isn't a replay afterwards. Maybe this is something that gets uploaded on a different platform, in a future time. I'm not sure.
Be sure to follow Nathan Smith on Gab.
Right, yeah. I think I'm uploading most of the long form videos on Odyssey right now too. And there's 30 or whatever of my early videos already on there. I noticed that you put out a video, I think even just today.
Yeah, it's over on Iron Age Archive. I'm not in this video though, but yeah. There's been some videos up there.
Paul E says, please mess with Revenge of the Sith. They're getting a little full of themselves. Oh man, I watched their show yesterday, Paul, and it was really hard for me to I wanted to start up my rivalry all over again because of what they were saying about the Travis Scott concert, which we'll discuss a bit of today. Okay. Also, during this live stream, those of you who are watching, it's possible that some of you might know more about these topics than us. And so if you have compelling resources that you want to send our way, feel free to drop them in the chats. What I do ask is that they are in some way kind of really easy for us to navigate. Don't send us a huge document that we're then going to be expected to read a couple pages of while we're live. It's if you want to send us a video and an exact timestamp of something interesting or whatever, we'll entertain that. But anything outside of that, if it takes too much work for us to figure out what it is that you sent us, we probably won't pursue it. Okay, so now I was thinking about how to approach these ideas. Something I've noticed that I've done a lot of times when discussing conspiracy theories and conspiracy ideas is that it's really easy to juxtapose yourself against something else so that you seem more reasonable, right? Do you notice how people do this? And everyone will kind of do this in the political realm or whatever. You'll have people who will be like, well, yeah, I think some socialism is okay, but I'm not a communist, or well, yeah, I'm right wing, but I'm not one of those ethno-nationalist right wings, So it's really common for people to set up a bumper in order to make themselves sound more reasonable. And I'll kind of catch myself do that from time to time. And it's oh yeah, well, I'll entertain conspiracy theories or whatever, but that doesn't mean I take certain things that seriously, even if I find them fun to talk about. And one of those bumpers has kind of been flat earth. It's I'm not a flat earth person, and I'll kind of compare myself against that to show that, hey, I'm still sort of in the Overton window. And another interesting one is
Aaron Rodgers did that last week too.
How so?
He went on a podcast and he's like, well, I'm not a far right extremist. I'm not a flat earther. I just think that I believe in bodily autonomy.
Exactly. That's exactly what I mean, right? Now, another one of those kind of bumpers that I've used before in the past is I don't even know if I want to say it, but we'll say cell phone towers of the fifth generation.
Yeah.
So the modern generation of cell phone towers, there's been a lot of controversy around those, and whether there's like people who have organized campaigns to destroy them and, you know, inhibit our actual, like, our grid. They're damaging our communications grid by attacking these things, because there's this grand idea that through the use of technology, they're trying to create a type of omnipotence through connecting like everything, and not just, you know, not just are the cell phones watching you and they can look through your cell phone camera, but there's speculation that they're setting up for a system that's way more invasive than that. And that's kind of one of the boundaries where it's like, yeah, I'm not one of those like weird 5 generation people. And another boundary that I put up is, it's like, oh, well, nanobots, you know, that's insane. That's out there. There's no way, there's like nanobots in injections or anything like that. I haven't really seriously entertained those ideas just because they sound so outlandish. But today, that is entirely what you and I are going to be exploring. Correct?
Yeah. And well, when you say nanobots, people think there's this like intelligent, autonomous hive of mini robots running around in your bloodstream. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I'm sure before we get to that stage, there's just going to be simple programmable, you know, small particles that when you send an electrical signal to them, they do this, or they do have one function. And that could be considered a nanobot or a proto-nanobot. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I think part of the reason that I'm taking these ideas a little bit more seriously now, and when I say take them more seriously, I don't mean that I believe them, but I'm at least willing to give them attention, because before I didn't want to give them attention because they sounded so outlandish, right? Part of the reason I'm willing to do that now, and that I understand them a little bit better, is I think that if you were to look at, like, you know, even in our lifetime, the jump in technology between what our cell phones are capable of as just a multi-tool, the idea that you could have a video camera and a calculator and access your emails, and, you know, all of that is just condensed in your hand. It's like, it's orders of magnitude more efficient than some of the early computers, like, you know, especially in like my parents' lifetime. Like, my mom used to tell me about when she was a kid and they took her on a field trip to see a computer, and it was the size of like a room, you know? And, you know, and my mom's not even that old. And what that computer could do versus what our cell phones can do, it's a huge, huge leap. And if you were to say to a person, like, if you were to bring up nanobots, and it sounds so insane, but it's like, okay, all of those people who are saying that it's insane, do they understand how our cell phones work? You know, like, if they were to open them up, like, the cell phone would seem just as insane to, like, my mom as a child, you know, as nanobots could be now. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's just a long way of me saying that I'm willing to entertain the idea that that technology has increased exponentially, and it's like orders of magnitude further ahead than what is public. And maybe that would take the form of something like a nanobot. Yeah.
And, you know, one of the big aspirations of medical science is to cure cancer. Mm-hmm. And so someday I could see there being some kind of particle that you inject that detects cancer and then surrounds the cancer cell and kills it. And then, you know, at that point, it's not really like, you know, people would say, oh, what's wrong with you? You're not in favor of nanobots? So what is now seen as some kind of like freakish technology, someday it's going to be this thing that everybody sees as altruistic.
Sorry, I'm just hearing feedback that there's some minor issues with the audio levels. Can you do an audio test?
Audio test.
Okay, hopefully that's a little bit better. Sorry, I missed that. I missed that last part. What were you saying there?
Oh, so nowadays people can only imagine nanobots as this dystopian, horror film technology. But once these technologies start to accomplish the quote unquote altruistic goals of science, then they're going to be taken for granted. They're going to be taken as life-saving.
Totally. And when I think of nanobots, well, the first thing I think of is the Metal Gear Solid series, because that was the first time I ever heard the term. But it's easy to think of like tiny little robots that are like, those what are the robots that are doing like parkour now?
Oh, the Boston.
Yeah,
Boston Dynamics or something, right?
That's right. Yeah. So it's not like what we're describing is Boston Dynamics robots that can do parkour, except for they're like microscopic. It's not like that. And interestingly enough, what nanobots would achieve is what very commonly happens already in nature. Like, we're basically just mimicking nature through technological means. Oh, we got a good number of people here, and some familiar faces too. Matt's here, Paul's here, Marcus. Okay.
And according to the whole theory of viruses, viruses are inorganic, or they're not even alive, right? They're like they're just particles, but they do things. They react with cells in a certain way.
Yes.
So that's basically what a nanobot is.
Yeah, it's not like alive. You could say that the difference is that it's organic, and maybe it's not like silicone based. Because that's typically what makes a machine, or what makes electronic components. Okay, so now what do you know about graphene and graphene oxide?
Only what I've read this morning.
Okay. So again, this is one of those things where those of you in the chats, if you have things that you want to add, we're certainly open to hear it.
What I have read, though, is that it has a lot of different technical applications.
Yes.
Because it has a lot of unique properties, its reactivity with oxygen groups, which I don't know what those are, and various other things. Yeah.
Yes. So, let's watch some sort of demonstrative videos here. Everyone should be able to see this. Okay, so we can see here, this is just showing that, why isn't it glitching? My computer's giving me more and more trouble. There we go. So here we see that it's magnetic, but it's like in this application, it's like a paste, or almost like a kind of dust, like a putty almost, that is also magnetic, which, that's not exactly a huge technological leap, but some of the applications are pretty interesting, which we'll be able to see here too. So there, it was interesting that it didn't just group together in just a ball. Like I didn't see it.
I didn't see the video play, actually.
Oh, is it doing the thing where you can't see now?
I can see your mouse cursor. Yeah. Seems like you didn't click play. I don't know.
Can you see this?
Yep.
You see the line here?
No, it's still on the thumbnail screen.
I'm so confused. Oh, I get what's happening here. Okay, Jeff, you talk for about 5 minutes. Let me sort something out. What it is the screen share that I've saved to you. I've shared the window, the browser window, but not my monitor. And so because I'm playing this through VLC, I'm jumping through multiple platforms. So I'll just need to do something technically here for a second.
Okay. Wow. Did you say 5 minutes?
Well, aim for 5.
Oh man.
We're so rusty at this. Hey, it's been so long.
Yeah. Whoa, you actually, okay. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. I've just
okay.
messing around with the screen share. Can you think of any like movies or videos or anything that have used like that looks like what's the T-1000 in the Terminator movie, right?
Yeah. I can't remember the movie that I'm thinking about too, but it's interesting that I guess it's because it's in water, so all of these alien-looking things always remind me of squids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like the sort of tentacles or whatever. There was also a movie. It was like a Disney or it was an animated movie. Wreck-It Ralph or Big Six or something. I forget what it was, but the concept was that this kid invented a robot that could self-assemble and then it could create all these other different shapes. And that is more the direction that we're starting to see robotic parts move into. And that's where a lot of this stuff ties in a bit more. Jeff, you can see this now, right?
No. Something changed, but I can't see it. I can see your Discord avatar now. Yeah, I was just going to say that the self-replicating robot, or the self-replicating thing is kind of like a major theme across sci-fi, and I guess in general, because man wants to play God, man wants to be a creator, and once man can create something that can create itself, then he kind of reaches that next level.
So in the chats, people are bringing up a bunch of movies. So the movie or the Netflix show Dark, Prometheus. Remember the Black Goo and Prometheus?
Yeah. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. So that particularly had a lot to do with gene modification as well.
Yeah.
Venom also. There's a degree of in Spider-Man, the symbiotes, that's about gene modification too, because the symbiote that came from outer space, the reason that Venom has powers that are similar to Spider-Man's is because when the rocket crashed, Spider-Man got infected with the symbiote first, and that's where you had like Black Spider-Man, and his DNA got imprinted into the symbiote, which then went into Brock or whatever, and he became Venom. And so that's why Venom can like stick to walls and has the same powers as Spider-Man. So yeah, that's like gene modification or whatever too. And then Carnage came out of that.
And it's very similar what they're doing with physical stuff with the hardware as they are trying to do with the software, where they're trying to get the AI to teach it, to learn, to be self-learning. And ultimately, it's about no longer needing the original order that's, that we exist in, the natural order, because now there's this new order, whether it's a silicon-based order or whatever, where it's like it's a complete transformation of life, right?
Right. Yes. Someone else is saying that the ECAR is saying Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the remake used jabs as a way to propagate. Okay, Jeff, you can see the monitor now, right?
No.
In your Discord, you can't see it?
I cannot. No.
Okay, well, I don't know what the issue is. I'll have to just describe to you. Our viewers will be able to see what's going on.
Okay, good.
So, Jeff, what we're seeing what looks like a bunch of grains of sand that are magnetic, kind of like there was an old toy that you could there would be all these little magnetic flakes, and you would use the magnet to put hair on a person.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a very similar thing to that, except for these magnetic parts. They're not grouping together in a ball. They're making a long line, almost like a tentacle or hair follicle or whatever. And then the next demonstration that we're seeing is there's two electronic components, and when the graphene orients itself in a line, it creates a conductive path. So it's turning these lights on by assembling itself into like what's effectively a wire, which when you think of just the implications of that alone is insane. It's like, imagine you have a bunch of grains of sand and then they suddenly become an electrical wire.
It's got a lot of potential transhumanist applications.
Exactly, yeah.
Create wires through your body, yeah.
Yeah. So now we have this sort of petri dish that has a bunch of these little graphene pieces, and someone took a Q-tip and just stirred everything up so that it was all scrambling around, and we're watching it assemble itself into this this long line. Okay, so that was the first video that I wanted to show there. Here's another.
Things realm, and also regarding health aspects. What is
Jeff, you can hear this, right?
graphene enabling?
Dang it. You can't even hear it?
No, I can't.
Okay, well, it's two guys talking. Oh, this is going to be a mess. It's two guys talking, and one of them is about to show us his graphene tattoo.
That's to do in the future.
Yes. So graphene is a very good sensor that you can stick directly.
It sent me the link. I could actually play it on my own.
It's literally like a video that I saved that's playing out of a VLC player.
Oh.
So
this is just a tattoo.
Anyway, it's just a guy showing this graphene tattoo that he has, but it's almost like a QR code. It's scannable. So this guy has like a scannable tattoo.
Contains electronic circuits and at the same time,
why is it graphene? Why couldn't it just be regular tattoo
and
ink?
these are measuring.
Because it's not just that sorry, that was a bad way of describing it being like a QR code or a barcode or something, because this is an actual component of an electronic circuit. It can actually, like, theoretically could actually conduct things. Wow. As opposed to just regular ink.
My blood flow inside my body. So it is actually real-time measuring my heart rate and oxygen concentration in my blood. And in the near future, it will also measure other things like hydration. And now he's describing how it can give biometric feedback because it's behaving as a circuit. It can read like his, heart rate and all this stuff. And
then it can actually output that message through scanning the code.
Yes.
Ooh.
Wow, that sounds super interesting.
Yes.
So it's not even, before the big conspiracy was it was like RF chips or something like that. It was some kind of like chip. But it may not even be that. It may just be literally like tattoos.
Now, are they scanning his right hand or his forehead?
It's on his what appeared to be his left. I mean, not that it matters. This is in his particular application. It's just it's just showing what the technology is available, but it looks like it's probably his left hand. Okay. Assuming that this isn't the video isn't mirrored in some way, but anyway, yeah. So that would be one application of it, is that we have these sort of printable electronic circuits. You could think of it that way. Now, where it gets also very strange is once you go from graphene to graphene oxide. Now, do you know the difference between the two? Because I'm having a hard time understanding it.
Well, there's oxygen involved, right?
Yep.
And this is kind of weird, but I read that graphene oxide can be used to produce graphene, which seems kind of backwards because it's already got graphene in it. So I don't know.
Right.
But maybe it could be used to produce more graphene. Is what they mean?
Right. Yeah, I guess, yeah. It's, well, graphene is actually really easy to get because like we could all get it right now by just using Scotch tape. It's just a very tedious process, and maybe graphene oxide is easier to get and make large quantities of. But anyway, so there's graphene oxide, and there's some speculation that graphene oxide is in the injections that everyone's receiving. There's also people saying that no, it's not on the ingredients list, but at the same time, it's like, who even really knows what's in the ingredients list? There's people who are saying that, well, it's some sort of like trade secret, so it wouldn't show up in the ingredients list, or it's some kind of like weird kind of copyright thing. I don't know.
And there are a number of scientific papers that have studied the effect of the use of graphene in vaccines as a way of protecting the vaccine particle and, you know, giving it safe passage into the body.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so this next video that we're going to watch, which, Jeff, I'm assuming you won't be able to see here. This is the one where we're watching graphene oxide react to sound waves. So the graphene oxide is in this area here.
Now, is this graphene oxide in water, or is it just graphene oxide, the powder? Again?
Well, the interesting thing is that it's hard to say whether it's a liquid or a powder because it can behave as both. It's almost like a putty that will take whatever form it needs to based on what stimulus it's being exposed to. But yeah, anyway, we're watching it like float through the air and react to this sound. There's other demonstrations that I tried to find too, where based on the sound, it was almost like it's on a speaker, and based on the sound that it's exposed to, it would take different formations. And it was like, you know, they could make it spherical, they could give it hard edges. And it was all dependent on the type of sound that was being pumped towards it.
And this is similar to experiments that have been done with water, where they have this like high frequency tone playing, and then the water dripping out of a hose will take a spiral shape or something. And then they change the frequency and it changes to this other formation.
Right. So theoretically, let's say that if that were in the injections, and people are receiving increasing amounts of that in their bodies, because, you know, there's always boosters. There's always, did you hear someone got into the code of the like
identification
out in Ontario? They got into in the code of it, and they found placeholders for up to 8 doses.
Yeah. Same with the Italian one as well.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, we're up to, I think, dose 3 now, but they've already made room for there being 8, and it's all within the time frame of it being like every 6 months or something. I think too.
I'm surprised that they stopped at 8. I thought there would be 666.
Well, I'm sure that's just for this round of
identification
that are supposed to cover for a few years. Once those few years are up, then they'll probably update the system, and it'll have, you know, an infinite number of placeholders.
Because by then it'll be a global system. It won't just be Ontario or Italy. We'll be on the global system.
Right, yeah. So now, also what's interesting to note is that Japan withdrew, I think it was specifically because they found that it was contaminated with like a metal.
Bunch of right-wing conspiracy theorists. That's Japanese.
Yeah, Japan, all of Japan. Yeah. So, you know, you could wonder whether or not that's just a batch that they were exposed to that was contaminated, or whether, no, it's actually a feature of the injections themselves. It's hard to say, but the technology surrounding graphene and graphene oxide is really, really unique. Especially once you you start to consider the sort of self-assembly implications of it, and actual like organic matter that will do the same thing. Like, because like we were talking about earlier, some of these things already occur in nature. And what if instead of creating a robot, you could just sort of piggyback on something that already naturally occurs and make it more robotic?
And self-assembly has this advantage where if you want to update it, you could just, send it a different code and then it'll rearrange itself. Whereas with nanobots, it's like if there's a 2.0 nanobot, then you got to do all the injections again.
Right. Oh, someone is bringing up, so Amanda says we have new LED streetlights all over Tampa. That's something I need to look into a little bit more too, because there's speculation that the lighting itself may cause things to react a certain way, but yeah, so the next kind of layer that I want to add to this is, like, what do you think of when you hear the word hybrid? What do you think? What do you think that's like referencing when you hear that?
I don't actually know where the word comes from, what the root word is, but I do think chimera.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it would be a sort of like mix of things, or some sort of some sort of weird transitionary thing, or a combination. In the sort of conspiracy world, when people talk about hybrids, it's usually like gene splicing. The goat that has spider DNA mixed into it.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
those sort of things. Or the cat that is injected with, or not injected, the cat that is given bioluminescent properties, so it literally glows in the dark. Like, those are things that have been around for a long time. Now, that is all just like organic to organic hybrids. But what if you had a hybrid from organic to inorganic? And when people think about that, a lot of times we jump straight to, okay, well, cyborgs. But maybe, obviously, that's sort of a transition. Like, humans are really complex, so why not do it to something that's way more simple? What if you could take some sort of animal and imbue it with qualities that are very similar to, like, graphene oxide? So you think of having like a graphene oxide animal, or maybe not, like, maybe an animal's too big. Maybe you go even smaller than that, something even more simpler, right? Now, you and I talked about this a little bit briefly before the show, but you know how, like, starfish, if you cut off a limb, it will create a new starfish, right? That limb will create a new starfish. So there's the animals that, like, you cut off an arm and then the arm will grow back, but with starfish, the limb will grow into a whole new animal entirely. And what if those could be the robots? Those could be the kind of self-replicating nanobots. Is some sort of like sea creature that is able to, again, have the qualities of graphene oxide, so it is able to replicate itself, and it's able to assemble in a manner that you want it to, and it's both organic and inorganic.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things about sequencing DNA is to unlock the secrets, right? So you figure out, well, okay, what is the starfish doing when it's replicating itself? And then it's like, oh, so it's these genes here, it's this stimulus, etc. And then you could probably carry that over to other organisms.
Right.
Or inorganic organisms.
Just so the chat is aware, I think I'm not getting all the posts, all the chats. I know AMOC9M posted something that I'm not able to see. Anyway, so that's sort of the next layer of this speculation here. And this might take me a minute to find. Oh, actually, let's watch this video first before we get into that. Again, Jeff, you won't be able to see it, but
researchers can create the voltage which activates the front.
It's showing it's showing these really, it's going to show these really small robots that are microscopic, and they're assembling themselves. So they're making their own little circuit. That's the idea behind it. Yeah, so we're watching that on the screen, and they're really small, and they're able to self-assemble is the main idea. And they're in some way programmable in the sense that they'll react in a way that you want them to.
In predictable ways.
Yes, yeah. So I guess Amo said, if you don't glow like a jellyfish, you're with the terrorists. I'm assuming that, yeah, that word is what got it blocked. So, okay, now I didn't know this, but apparently they use horseshoe crab blood in a lot of
jabs.
Yeah, what is it about horseshoe crabs? Is it they don't die or something, or
maybe it's some sort of preservative, but it's sort of like I guess some kind of agent that the chemicals sit in, almost like saline, like the salt water or whatever. But yeah, apparently we like harvest, and it's literally blue. I'm showing I'm showing images of it on the screen right now. It's literally blue blood, and apparently that is some sort of agent that we use. So, like, I hope we know what the implications of all of these things are going to be, because I find it really weird that we would be getting injected with the blood of another creature. And I keep hearing that all this sort of like alternative methods of treating, they all tend to be some kind of like anti-parasitic.
And it looks like that creature from Prometheus, actually. One of the stages of it, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, the reason that we bring this up too is there have been people who've been saying that they're finding some sort of hybrid creature in
jabs.
Now,
oops, you said the V word.
Right, yeah. Well, we already said it. Now, again, this is the kind of thing that, not that I expect the algorithm to be able to know whether we're treating this topic with reasonable suspicion or not, but this is the kind of thing where it's like there would be no way for us to know whether or not this is a prank or in any way verified. How the story goes is that there are some doctors or there are some medical professionals that were taking samples or whatever of the injection, and they were looking at them under microscopes and finding all sorts of really weird things, including these weird tentacly kind of like, whatever, miniature octopus creatures. And there's speculation that they're alive and they carry in some ways inorganic elements. So hybrid in the sense that they're like it's like these could be the sort of nanobots, but they're not just bots. They're more like nano-hybrids.
Like some kind of biological robot.
Yeah. Like it's kind of like they're the first cyborgs. It's just happening on this microscopic level. And it happens to be in a way that could be very useful for other things. And it can self-replicate, and it can self-assemble, and it can organize in ways that you can program.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the theory anyway. I don't know whether or not there's, the people who are skeptical of that, of whether or not these hybrids they're skeptical of the chain of custody. They're saying that, they're effectively saying that this was some sort of prank, that these people have been duped. And maybe they have been. I don't know. but at least it's like I kind of treat it this way. If it's a story, if it's a narrative, if this is just a sci-fi story and it's not reality, it's still very interesting. Like if we're talking fiction here, that isn't completely outside the realm of like plausible reality, in my opinion.
I mean, the thing about sci-fi is that, sure, it's fiction, it's fantastical, but at the same time, it tells us something about our pursuit of science and our desires for it and the things that we project into the future.
Mm-hmm.
So, sure, these things seem ridiculous today, but they tell us something about the mindset of people who practice things like bioengineering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that part is the truth behind the fiction.
Okay, let's catch up with the chats very briefly. So people are bringing up luciferase,
Yeah.
because that has a bioluminescent quality to it. It'll actually glow. Do you know much more about it? I know we were talking a little bit about it before. Can you kind of try and explain it?
So it's an ingredient in the
jabs.
Mm-hmm. That's derived from. It's like kind of in some way patented, I think, but it's derived from the blood.
Yeah. Is this from the blood of another creature, or?
I think it comes from those horseshoe crabs. It
comes from the horseshoe crabs? Okay.
I think. I'm not entirely, I might be blending things that don't belong together, but I do know that it's an ingredient and it has some sort of glowing quality to it, which also is why the lighting comes up. Like there being UV lights being installed in cities, and it's like, what the heck is that about?
And this could be one of those things where scientists thought it was cute, like, haha, take this, Christians. It's the bringer of light, right? We're not talking about Satan.
Right.
Or it could be one of those things where it's like, we can hide Satanism behind this guise of...
Right.
Yeah.
Cinder Mountain Villager says, it's because horseshoe crabs are obviously demons. Look at them.
Yeah, I mean, they do have this look about them.
Ikar says the first cyborg was actually the Pope. Surprised you didn't know this. Hey, I knew all about this. I tried to warn everyone.
He's hiding his power levels.
Yeah. Jeff, you fill the air while I read the comments, because I don't think... Here's what we should do, Jeff, is you should pull up this stream in another window and just have it muted so that you don't get the audio loop or whatever. But then you can be reading the chats too, and you can respond to the chats as well.
Yeah, great idea. Should have thought of that.
And someone else brought up the recent mass casualty event at the Travis Scott concert. I first heard of Travis Scott because he's that guy from Fortnite. And unfortunately, along with like Master Chief and stuff. In some ways, I'm very dubious about Fortnite because I see certain imagery that's in there, and you and I have discussed symbolism at length, and you know that we don't just automatically assume that if a symbol appears that means that it's evil. Like different symbols can mean different things for different groups. But if you know that a group is using a symbol in a certain way, it's suggesting a belief system that's attached to it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, for instance, you could say that an inverted cross, maybe that means like Satanism, or it could mean like the apostle, what was it, Peter, who was crucified upside down, because he didn't want to be compared to Christ. He didn't want people to make any sort of confusion or whatever, and he didn't think he was worthy of the death that Christ was given, so he requested to be crucified upside down. So you could make the argument that an inverted cross, well, no, it's not Satanism, it's that particular apostle, right? But if you're, if you're using symbols in certain ways, it suggests beliefs. And I've had that sort of skepticism with with Fortnite where I'm like, they're doing stuff, you know, they're saying things here. And, you know, I'll like play Fortnite with my nephew who like isn't necessarily, I don't get to see him anymore because he lives across the border. And so I'll play with him. And at the same time, I'm like, this game is trying to propagandize to him, you know? And Travis Scott was it was the first concert in game, the first sort of like digital concert that I think even occurred. And so Travis Scott recently has this concert in real life, and man, this symbolism that they're using is so overtly occult. It's like, it's really hard to not like schizo post when you look into it.
Yeah.
Do you know much about what was used there?
Yeah, I've seen some of the images. And it's another one of those things where the apologists will say, oh no, they're just like having a laugh, right? Like, it's like, haha, you know,
right.
When I use, yeah. But it's just a thing that comes up so much in pop culture that, I don't know, at what point you know, get some new material, guys. Or either that, or you're actually, you know, trying to conjure something up.
Yeah. And it could be that it's sort of like, I don't know how conspiratorial we want to get with this mass casualty incident, because, you know, the reality is that that like tramplings happen. There are sometimes emergency situations where people get trampled and they die. And with this concert, all of the media, all the newspapers, the phrasing that they were using was sudden crowd surge. Crowd surge is what they were saying. But what's unique about this is that, well, and I think it was 8 people who died, officially anyway, 8 people who died, but way more people were injured. You would think that they would say people were trampled, but that's not how they died. They died of cardiac arrest. So it's like the crowd surged, and what it induced cardiac arrest.
8 people died of cardiac arrest then?
I believe so. I believe that's what it was. Now, I mean, it may be
weird.
Yeah, and maybe people didn't get trampled. Maybe they were just like pushed together so tight. I heard stories about people, once they lifted their arm up, they wouldn't be able to bring it back down because the people around them would be pushed into them so close. So maybe people kind of like suffocated that way. But again, like, it's still very strange. And there are some other, aside from the symbolism, there are some other very strange things around it. Like, there was a security guard who felt a prick in his neck and then went unconscious, and he was revived using naloxone or Narcan, or he was revived using an OD kit. So someone injected drugs into his neck and he passed out. And I forget who was, someone brought up Revenge of the Cis earlier in the stream, because Revenge of the Cis were very like, they're like, don't get into the QAnon garbage, like all the symbolism and everything. But like, can you remember what the last mass casualty event at a concert was?
Las Vegas?
Yeah. And it's not like we know anything that happened there. You know, like it's really easy to poke holes in the official narrative there. And, you know, you and I know that a lot of these music festivals or music award shows and everything, they're initiation rituals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe something of that was going on here, where it was some sort of experiment, some sort of test, but they also, maybe they were testing out new technology, is what my speculation is. And of course they do their thing where they use all this sort of weird symbolism, because maybe they're trying to conjure things, or maybe they're praying to certain deities or whatever it is that they do.
And ultimately these things are kind of like a mass hypnosis. People go there to have this almost out of body experience, right? To just get lost in the music and the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a form of like kind of removing the person from his self-consciousness.
Yes. Yeah. There's a sort of trance quality to it.
Yeah.
What's been really funny is, you know, there's this sort of like redneck QAnon boomer, who entertains conspiracies and everything, that sort of weird shamanic resurgence that you're seeing in those circles. But to see it interact with the like African black sort of like voodoo systems and their whole conception of magic, where you see they have their own sort of QAnon conspiratorial, where they're calling it magic too. And it's interesting to see how their circles are interpreting these events as well, because they're looking at it and they're like, oh, well, Travis Scott was trying to perform magic and this was a sacrifice. This is blood magic.
Mm-hmm. So the name of the stream is called Black Goo. When I first saw it, I actually thought it said Black God.
Oh, huh. Yeah. So again, my speculation is that there's some sort of combination here of it being ritual, it also being potentially some kind of sacrifice, it being an experiment, a massive, like I think that what we're seeing with mandatory
jabs
is, well, these are experiments. It's experimental. They're no long-term case studies, and they're just testing out how to manipulate human genetic information on some level, or how to get genes to react certain ways. I don't know the nuances well enough to know what defines genetic modification or anything like that. I don't know where the line is when it's properly classified that. But when you take all of the things that we were discussing earlier in the show with graphene and graphene oxide and these hybrid parasites and the self-replication, and specifically it being able to assemble with the input of sound. So this is probably like the largest concert where you've had that many people together, probably all
jabs.
I think they needed to show proof of
identification.
I think they could get away with showing positive tests.
Negative tests.
Yeah, negative tests rather, showing that they didn't have anything. But you think of the density of people who would be at that concert, and they're just having all these these sound waves being pumped into them, and maybe it was inducing medical situations, and maybe people were panicking, maybe it caused some sort of hysteria, who knows.
And ultimately, what we're really seeing in a large scale is this pattern where it's basically cybernetics, where they're gathering big data and all kinds of, they're doing all kinds of research, right? Like psychology has been a very popular field of research for over a century. So they're figuring out how the human mind works and how the human behavior is patterned, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now they're also implementing the other side of that, which is how do we use this data to engineer humans going forward?
Yes.
Yeah, and that was one of these videos that came out of Google. It was claimed to be like an internal video for Google employees,
Mm-hmm.
but they were talking about the future of big data and how we're going to use big data to actually incentivize behavior that is desirable.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's ultimately the pattern of man trying to play God, right?
Right. Yeah, and we would say that like there's the idea of Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent, and where there's a question about how much of our free will is actually our will and how much of it is just the product of what we've been indoctrinated into. And so what even is democracy if from cradle to the grave you're constantly like programmed to accept a certain system that is against your interests? And there's that whole side of things too. Now that is just dealing with information that you're exposed to on the, I guess, like on the either verbal, like the auditory or visual level. But imagine information that you're being exposed to in some way on the like genetic level, because like DNA is information. It's just biological information. And at what point does, like, if you, at what point does, at what point does it become genetic, I guess is what I'm wondering. Because, you could say that, well, your parents, your genetic code is the product of both of your parents. And then you take identical twins and you say, okay, well, they have the same, biologically, they're the same. But then later on in their life, it's like the environment has affected them each in different ways. So there's slight differences. Or you think of, it's like why, and I'm a lay person when it comes to this stuff. So if I'm saying things that are completely wrong, maybe correct me or forgive me. But, like I've always thought it very strange that once you get cut and you produce scar tissue, the fact that your body keeps producing scar tissue, even though the wound is healed, suggests that the wound is now a part of your genetic makeup. Is that correct?
That's interesting.
Like, that's the only way I can rationalize that.
Yeah, in some way that actually does sound reasonable.
Right. So you could say that, or, you would say that like it's really silly or it's really stupid to suggest that light waves could change a person's genes. They could alter a person's genetic code. And then it's like, yeah, that sounds silly. But then, once you get skin cancer because you've been in the sun for too long, that very clearly changed your genetic makeup. Right? Like,
yeah.
So you could say that the photons or whatever, the lumen, I don't know, whatever it was that was coming out, I guess that's a type of radiation, not necessarily just light, but that in and of itself altered your genes. So, and this is like really hokey, woo-woo, whatever, right? But at what point does, now you've read something or you've heard something, like maybe I speak certain words to you, and how far down the line does that actually change your genetic code? Because maybe it prompted you to change your behavior. And that then change of behavior caused more, obvious genetic changes.
Yeah, like what if it altered your brain chemistry? What if it altered your mood? What if it altered the wiring of your brain long term?
Right.
Then you've got physical differences, physical manifestations of like something that was initially just mental, right?
Yes. Like maybe I could, through the use of my words, I could convince you to, go into the sun for unreasonable hours every day. You then get skin cancer. It's like, okay, so the information that I spoke through my mouth changed your genes. Right? Like through cause and effect, not directly. But I guess why I'm bringing all this stuff up is because it's kind of like the boundaries here get blurred very quickly. And we've been dealing with altering people's mindsets and ideas through the exposure of information. But now we're introducing, well, chemical has always been a thing, right? The whole pharmaceutical side of things, like a person's mindset when they're drunk versus, or when they're intoxicated versus when they're of sound mind and everything, that obviously changes the way that they behave. But now on this huge
interesting tidbit, pharmakia, the root word of pharmaceutical, pharmakia actually means sorcery. In Greek.
Yes. Yeah, because like sorcery isn't just words and spells and whatever, right? There is an interplay between actual chemicals, because if you were to say that if a person talks about taking a whole bunch of DMT and they had some sort of spiritual experience, they'll describe it as that. Well, it's really hard to separate the chemical from the spiritual because of how it interacts with your body. And so a lot of those old, like the pharmakia, there is a huge overlap between chemical and spiritual. And now, all of society is being inducted into this pharmakia ritual, and maybe it's reacting in really weird ways when people go to concerts and, and that brings me to something that, Clown Wizard used to always mention. Well, maybe he only mentioned it once or twice and it really stuck out to me, but you remember the 4 phases of man in alchemy?
Yes. The vegetative man, animal man, mineral man. What's the one I'm missing?
So there's organic
man.
There's organic man, there's GMO man, then there's machine man, and then finally there's android or avatar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've also heard this idea about do you know about the third, like the third pillar? Are you familiar with that idea? I think we talked about it a little bit before.
Yeah, remind me again.
So you know how in a lot of like Freemason imagery, and not just Freemason, a lot of the mystery schools, they'll have two pillars, and then in the middle there's usually like light shining down. There's a third pillar in the center that's like a beam of light in between these two pillars, and that's sometimes referred to as the third pillar. And the speculation is that, well, there's dualism and there's yin and yang, and that's each pillar. And in the center, well, those two pillars, some people say that, well, that's actually your DNA. And, our DNA looks like a double helix spiral, right? Kind of like a staircase.
Yeah.
You could say it's two pillars that are spiraling around each other. And the third pillar is, well, the speculation is that it's a synthetic alteration to our genes. So it's adding this other additional thing to our DNA.
And it's a pillar of light.
Yeah, it's light. And it's sort of like, maybe we talked earlier about we talked about cyborgs, and we talked about maybe an easier way of doing that is through a less complicated life form, like whatever, these sea creatures. And you turn them into hybrids in the sense that they're partly synthetic and partly organic, biological. And eventually you work your way all the way up to us, and where our genes are then altered, where there's this sort of third pillar. And like, I remember when, what do they call them? Chemtrails. Chemtrails were like the goofiest thing ever, And then all of a sudden we have like MSNBC admitting that they're a thing, and Tucker Carlson's talking about it, and it's like, oh, I guess this was just mainstream. This is a thing that they do now. And people have talked about, well, there's the fluoride in the water that supposedly like helps your teeth or something. I don't know, like, it supposedly makes you healthier, but it also supposedly calcifies your pineal gland or something, or it like creates in some way a what's that old surgical procedure they used to do to people where they would separate the hemispheres of their brain?
A lobotomy?
Lobotomy, yeah. It's like it's a sort of numbing or a kind of chemical lobotomy.
Yeah.
That's what people are referencing when they say that the pineal gland is being calcified. You're on a very soft level being lobotomized, and as if there's some sort of effort or interest in increasing the ability to do that, so that the environment causes people to change, and eventually you have these like self-replicating or hybrid matter that is, some of it's people, some of it's creatures. It can be programmed. It's like programmable matter, and on the particle level, everything just turns into black goo, and the entire world is black goo, and matter only exists as black goo, and the whole world, the universe, is taken over by black goo. And it's sort of like the Borg, but it's worse than that. It's not even like humanoid figures. It's like dust particles that are, everything is the black goo, and the universe exists within this weird artificial avatar matrix thing. And all of our brains are uploaded into this Minecraft simulator, and Mark Zuckerberg controls all the black goo, and he lives forever, and our minds are all connected to him, and he is the black goo. There, that's the giant grand conspiracy.
And then we find out that he was the black goo the whole time.
Yeah. Anyway, So what do you think of all that?
I mean, it even if it's not like literal, I think it kind of works on a symbolic level at the very least.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know what to think of these things. Like I definitely shouldn't stress about them, but they do cause a degree of existential concern to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people are like, yeah, well, whatever, we'll all just get
jabs.
I'm like, but the implications of this are huge. You don't know about the roots of pharmakia. Oh, man. Anyway, I'm going to catch up on the chats. I feel like we covered so many different things. Is there any way that you can kind of like try and tie them together in a way that's more coherent than how I just rambled?
My daughter's kind of distracting me in the background.
Okay.
But I think pulling back, what we're seeing is that, and Heidegger kind of refers to this as the enframing, right? Mm-hmm. Which is that at a certain point, we create technology to kind of dominate the world, but eventually that technology comes to dominate us. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that we can think of is just to keep pushing the the edge of technology further and further. And using that technology to then create even more technology. And this is basically, you could say that this is demonic, right? This is like the physical manifestation of a spiritual sickness that we have. Mm-hmm. And when you tell people, okay, yeah, maybe we should stop at human cloning, they're like, "What are you, some kind of Luddite?" They snap at you, right?
Right.
It's like, "Oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't go to Mars." "Oh, what's wrong with you, man?" And that is the technological enframing. That is, you're basically possessed by a demon at that point if you're talking like that. It's like if technology must continue forever and forever, and whoever opposes it is an enemy of the revolution. Mm-hmm. What else? How else do you want me to describe you other than spiritually sick and possessed?
Well, yeah, and again, like the Amish, they just decided that at a certain point, okay, well, technology just like ends. Like we're gonna stay. I guess their whole thing was that they decided to not interact with the outside world, even though they do a bit. Like they'll sell things and stuff, but it's basically like whatever it is that they can make with their hands. So they just end up with like horse carriages and everything. But you could look at it like they developed technology up to a certain point and then they hit the pause button. So they were successfully able to do that.
And I'm not necessarily an advocate for Ludditism either. What I'm saying is that we need to fix the spiritual illness before we push this thing even further.
Right. And like the Luddite isn't correct in the sense that like, oh, technology is bad and we just need to hit pause on technology. That's not what the issue is. Technology it's not inherently evil, but technology also isn't inherently good, because the people who are like, well, technology will save us, like we'll through our advances we'll eliminate crime. Like, well, that's most certainly not the solution either. The problem is on some level, well, it comes down to like humans are corrupt. Humans are corrupt, and we're most definitely being influenced by spirits. Like and a lot of these things, like I remember learning about, the spiritual realm and angels and demons and everything. I remember learning about that sort of spiritual language when I was young, and it always kind of like did and didn't make sense to me to a degree. But now I feel like it's so obvious. It's like, and you say that maybe like a person's like possessed by a demon. It's like, okay, that sounds pretty out there. And it's like if a person is losing their frame of mind and they've lost control and they're shouting and everything, it's like, okay, well, were they possessed by a demon, or was it just that, you know, they got really worked up, they were upset about something? You know, why explain it in a supernatural way when it's not? But now,
it's not necessarily that there's a demon that's living inside of your body whispering in your ear. I mean, that could be the case, but not necessarily. But it's also the fact that you know, we live in these like principalities, right?
Right.
These like earthly realms that where these forces are around us, and so it's really hard sometimes to just not hear the whisperings when they're all around in our environment.
Yeah, and you look at it like we're if they're influencing us, we're definitely programming them into the world. Like whatever these whispers are, the more we exert ourselves into the earth, the more mastery we gain over the world, the more we're making them become manifest, like physically.
Yeah.
Whereas before,
a great example of that is just AI, right? We're trying to summon this conscious digital being into existence.
Yeah. And oh man, yeah. And I know that sometimes we talk about these things like we just, as if they're new ideas, and really it's like, well, no, these are things that people have been talking about forever, or for a long time anyway. But just like deeper and deeper, we see more and more implications of it. What do you know about like the ether, and because sometimes that's called
the fifth element.
Yeah, the fifth element, or the God particle, or dark matter, or they're not all exactly the same thing, but they're kind of alluding to something similar. And maybe there is a kind of effort to take whatever is going on in that plane, whatever that is, and trying to make it an actual physical thing, as if it isn't already in some way physical. But it's like us reaching into that is what's corrupting everything.
Yeah.
Like something I really wish sorry, I keep cutting you off there, but something I really wish I understood better was like CERN. What the heck is going on there?
Yeah, and CERN is trying to tap into this like hidden universe. It's like, you know, this other dimension that's parallel to us. And that's one of the things that is that distracting.
as long as you can keep your thoughts together, we're good.
Yeah, and that is one of the concerns. Well, the reason why one of the big reasons why I finally decided to go to church and become Orthodox is because of a book by Father Seraphim Rose, Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. And one of the things that he talks about is that there is a resurgence right now in spirituality, but it's just a very dangerous type of spirituality. There is this craving now, you know, everybody wants to reconnect back to the spiritual realm. But the problem is they lack a framework for discernment.
Right.
So it's like they go to this yoga teacher and he teaches them some breathing exercises, and then he tells you to like kind of erase your ego. And it's all these little things that you know, the modern human isn't equipped to protect himself against the things that he doesn't even know he's messing with. And there was this thing that Jonathan Pajot talked about recently, which is that at least the ancient pagans, when they practiced this kind of stuff, at least they practiced it in a community.
Right.
So even if they were messing with demons, they had a traditional wisdom. They had a lineage of wisdom that they could refer to know, or to at least have some discernment over which forces are pure evil and which forces are malevolent and which forces might be good.
Right.
Whereas nowadays, it's just kind of like everybody's just jumping into it. Oh, hey man, let's do some DMT. Let's go to this like group meditation, the 7 chakras meditation. And it's like, man, you guys, you're just opening the door, right? I'm not saying that spirits are necessarily going to, like malevolent forces are necessarily going to come in, but you're opening the door wide open. Yeah.
And I like something I kind of have wrestled with a little bit too is that because I've delved further into the, I guess kind of like I've delved further into occult knowledge than, well, certainly most other Christians around me. And
in the chat, Mandy Joan just made a really good point related. God wants us to be ourselves, not erase ourselves. Erasing your personality is not from God.
Right, absolutely. And that's the sort of philosophical underpinnings of a lot of those belief systems where, yeah, they're trying to, the sort of global consciousness is what they're trying to do, like the elimination of the ego and everything.
And it ties back to the black goo. Once everybody gets erased, you're black goo.
Yes. The black goo is just the matter manifestation of that same concept, whereas they're trying to achieve that in a sort of spiritual sense too, where even their very like ethereal person is all merged together. It's all the same thing, which is, yeah, that's a bad idea. Like that's not a good thing. So a person who kind of like understands the philosophical underpinnings of a lot of those different groups, they would be able to hear things and exercise a degree of discernment, right? And maybe they'd be able to investigate something and protect themselves from the components of it that are wrong, and they're like, I've wrestled a fair amount with, to what degree do I educate myself about the occult? Because as a Christian, it's like, well, I would rather just, if I'm going to know anything, I would rather know God and know good rather than like study evil, because that's like, ultimately that's dumb. Eventually the act of you studying it is you in a way worshiping it and you giving it more attention than it deserves,
Yeah.
That being said, there is something healthy about like exposing evil things. And still, like, I look at my Lego video, and I don't think there are many Christians who were equipped to be able to dissect what was going on there in that movie. And I was able to, because I understood how these other belief systems worked. So I could say to the Christians, here is how they're trying to subvert you, like I could say that to other Christians and point it out. And so for me, it was important for me to go into some of those things to a degree. And one of my frustrations that I found in a lot of Christian circles out here in the West is that I find that a lot of their prayer is in many ways very superficial. It's like when they think of what praying is, they think that it is just the intellectual exercise of talking to God, or more, not even that, it's them talking at God. So it's just them creating a mental list of all the things that they want God to fix for them in their life. And it kind of ends there for a lot of people. And it's them like saying what it is that they're struggling with. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing per se. And it's not like God doesn't use that. But there's deeper layers and there's deeper levels to it, like, actually listening to God. And I think if a person needs to be able to go deep enough into that. And in other parts of the world, they've like idolized being able to go into depth. And the problem is that they're going into depth in the wrong direction, like you're saying with people not having discernment, and it not being like a community, it not being a community thing and everything. And yeah, that's kind of like what I bumped into, is where I would think that, okay, so I want to go into more depth, but around here, well, okay, does that mean like people are just repeating the same chorus of a worship song over and over and over and over again, like it's some sort of mantra? And when they talk about like going deeper in prayer, they just mean praying for longer, even though they're effectively doing like the same thing. They're creating a longer list, but it's still just as superficial. And then out in the East, it's like, okay, there's plenty of depth there, but I don't trust the conclusions that they're coming to and everything. And then, you know, out here too, there's, you look at the like Jack Dorseys of the world and how much just like drugs and psychedelics are actually influencing these people, and oxygen deprivation, and triggering all these altered states in order to get spiritual insights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
another thing I noticed is that a lot of this stuff is motivated by pride.
yeah.
So I have some friends who are into that, you know, startup scene.
Mm-hmm.
And initially they're doing meditation so that they could be more productive and to kind of like send positive vibes out into the universe so that they will get positive vibes back.
Right.
And then the next thing you know, they're worshiping these like deities that they don't even know what they're messing with.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're getting engaged with these like very weird people who do sex magic.
Okay.
So it's a very, you know, and it's that incremental temptation, basically, is my point. It's like,
right. Yeah.
At first it seems innocent enough, and then it's an initiation, right?
Right. And then eventually it becomes an arms race too, like a literal spiritual arms race, where the Jack Dorseys of the world or whatever, it's like they think that they need to enter into these altered mental states or whatever, because otherwise, like, you know, the other people are going to do it and defeat them. And it's like Elon Musk saying that it's the same reason he was trying to warn about AI, and now he's ushering in the Neuralink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because he's like, otherwise it'll conquer us.
Mm-hmm.
So we may as well join them. And in the effort of attempting to join them, we're building it. But to go back to, so out east, there's the problems with them having the depth, but not the discernment. And then in the West, it's like a lot of times it's superficial, but, you know, in most cases, guided in the right direction. And one thing that always fascinated me, because I've spent, you know, a decent amount of time in like out east in the Himalayas and in India and stuff, and I've met some very interesting people. And out there, you have these like hermits you have these people, and they're like revered. They're revered for what it is that they do when they sit there as a homeless person. And out here, out west, well, there is zero reverence for any sort of ascetic. That's what it is. There's like, we don't appreciate the ascetic out here at all. And in the West, they idealize it, right? Or sorry, out East, they idealize it. Mm-hmm. And like, I wish that there was a way to, like the Bible describes prayer and fasting, because the act of fasting it's going to help focus you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I wish within Christian communities, there was more of an effort for there not just to be that kind of community, but for there to be more depth and a sort of like mentorship and everything. But
yeah,
it doesn't exist here.
That's one of the things that I have found in Orthodoxy, especially the mentorship part. Well, both really, because Orthodox do fast on Wednesdays and Fridays mm-hmm. to kind of remember Christ's betrayal and mm-hmm. Christ's crucifixion. And then we also have a long fasting period before Christmas and Easter. Mm. And they make it very clear, though, right? My priest makes it very clear, at least. It's like, it's not about, like, the act of fasting is not about your salvation. It's not going to save you.
No.
Yeah, but it's a practice to get you to focus, exactly.
Right. And like so there's ascetic practices. Like ascetic comes from it kind of in some ways means the same thing as athletic. Like they have sort of the same roots. It is like a disciplined person, except for the athlete is like disciplining their body, and the ascetic is in some ways disciplining through, in most cases, deprivation. And so, you could consider fasting a component of that. And yeah, there are the people who think that they'll reach enlightenment through asceticism. And that's like the really old Vedic traditions or whatever. Yeah. And then you end up with people that take it in the really weird direction. Like you have the cannibal yogis, Mm-hmm. And the thing is that in their belief system, that would be the logical conclusion. All the things that they're doing, all the insane, like that would be how you would try and reach enlightenment in their framework, but their framework is not coming from a healthy place. And so that's why it manifests itself so crazy, right? Someone in the chats here, Amandi, is asking about Jack Dorsey. Can you explain Jack Dorsey? So Jack Dorsey being was he the creator of Twitter?
Yeah.
Is he still the...
I think he's still CEO. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So he's CEO or creator, maybe CEO of Twitter, and he's really into, like, he doesn't even really do much with Twitter anymore, other than act as a figurehead. But he's really into like the going deep into these trances. And Alex Jones has talked about how a lot of these Silicon Valley elite people, you could think of a what are those chambers? The sensory deprivation tanks. Mm-hmm. So, there's just no external stimuli. And because there's no external stimuli, your brain starts to kind of unravel itself. And in many cases, in ways that are very healthy. Like when you're not distracted, sometimes you end up confronting things that you're ignoring because they're, it's not healthy for you to be ignoring them, but that's your coping mechanism. So a lot of times people get insights through these deprivations, but these deprivation tanks, but eventually that's not enough. It's sort of like you acclimate to that. So then maybe people use something like ayahuasca or DMT or whatever, but then eventually they acclimate to that. And through the use of different technological scientific means, people keep upping the stakes. And there are people, I don't know if Jack Dorsey has been engaged in this himself, but apparently on the higher level, there are people who will, they'll essentially like induce, they'll put themselves in a kind of technologically induced coma, and they'll just have oxygen being pumped into their body while they're like unconscious. And then because their body is like in a way dying, or they're getting close to the boundary between life and death. And so that then grants them insights into the nature of the world, which they then use to they kind of like receive insights about technology that informs the way that they invent things. And, a lot of our intelligence agencies are involved in that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
But it's like when you go into that realm, what are you bringing back? What makes you think that it's good just because it's advanced?
And it goes back to temptation. Like you're tempted to continue going back and dig deeper and deeper. Mm-hmm. But another aspect of this is that it's knowledge, but it's knowledge without wisdom. So
yes, yeah. I'm just trying to catch up on the chats here. Yeah, I know I always say silicone instead of silicon. Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley is a very different thing from Silicon Valley.
I always thought, I've discovered in my life, there's a lot of things that, like, the phrase dog eat dog world? Up until like maybe a few years ago, I thought it was doggy dog world. like DOGGY, doggy dog, as if to say that like the dogs are always playing because they're doggy dogs. Same thing with the American national anthem. I thought that I thought Dawn's early light was a thing, not Dawn's early light. I thought Dawn's early was a word.
Oh, Dawn's early. Okay.
Like DON, as Dawn's early.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I thought it meant the same thing as like Dawn's light because I was able to infer the context.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought it was Silicon Valley because silicone. But I guess they're cons.
Silicone is the stuff they put in breast implants.
Well, that's used in tech, right? Like that's where you get transistors is from silicone.
Mm.
All right. Anyway, Snoop Doggy Dog World. Okay. Well, I think we covered everything that I intended to for this live stream. Do you have anything that you want to add? And anyone in the chats who has anything too? What are your thoughts? Oh, wait a second. Silicon is a different thing than silicone.
Okay, yeah.
I thought all this time I thought they were the same thing. I thought that like silicone in breast implants was the same thing as what transistors are made of. I thought it was the same thing as silicone. Oh man, sometimes I'm simultaneously so well informed and so ill informed. It's infuriating. Anyway, is there any kind of final thoughts that you had, or I guess also where do you see what it is that we're doing going? Like, do you still have an interest to have these kind of chats? I know this was a topic that I wanted to bounce off of you, and I thought other people might find it interesting too. So,
yeah, anytime. But yeah, I mean, I've been trying to. I think each time we talk, it's like we kind of peel back a different layer, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like the most difficult part is kind of showing the onion unpeeled.
Yeah.
Because it does take many of these different layers at a time, right?
Right.
Yeah. Because these patterns of behavior, they all tie together back into like every other aspect, right? Mm-hmm. It's ultimately it's all theological too. And it's like, what you believe about existence really informs what you tend to believe about the phenomena of the physical world.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I thought we covered a lot of good stuff today. And maybe I actually do plan to reach out to Jonathan Pacho eventually. I know he's a busy guy though, but I do want to. I think it'd be interesting to talk with him about all of this, how the different layers line up. Different layers of symbolism line up.
Yeah. That would be nice to be able to have a conversation with him. I almost feel like I wouldn't know where to start with someone like him.
Yeah.
Same with Jay Dyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if I ever got a chance to interview either of those guys, I would be like, you've put out so much content. I don't know that I have anything to ask that you haven't already addressed, and I don't have any like unique insights. I don't know. I guess I could probe on certain specific topics or whatever, but
yeah.
Begone Thought says, what do you see as the best and worst case result of Black Goo? What do you think, Jeff?
Well, ultimately, I think we're all going to be okay, right?
Right.
Like good does win.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like the tragedy is how much pain we have to go and suffering we have to go through to get there.
Right.
And I do expect in a lot of ways, I do think a lot of this stuff will reach its its ultimate conclusions. So I think because of the technological enframing, and because people just believe so hard in this idea that we have to go full speed towards a transhumanist spacefaring society, that we're just going to end up wrecking ourselves.
Right.
Yeah. So and it doesn't have to be a black pill. I think because out of that is when that's the turning point, right?
What if the black pill is it's not?
It's the black goo pill.
Yeah, it's actually goo. You're just ingesting black goo, and then it becomes Prometheus, and your genes get altered. You decompose right there, and then xenomorphs later emerge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the best case scenario with black goo is that it's accessible, but it's kept within, it's like contained. So, like the idea of programmable matter is really cool. Like that's sort of what we're seeing with 3D printers. It's like you have this material that can be printed in any shape that the information communicates it to. That's awesome. And what if it's not just set, but it can kind of be altered in real time based on what a person wills for that. That's really cool. I think part of the reason that I liked Minecraft so much when I first discovered it was because I was able to, I was able to interact or alter this environment that I could walk around in. So I was engaging in that act in a digital sense, but the idea of being able to do that in a material sense too is really cool, just as long as it doesn't take over everything.
But given our fallen nature, we're only going to use that towards really bad stuff.
Right.
Probably. And there's kind of like a Neoplatonic angle to this as well, where mankind is trying to transform the entire physical universe into what Heidegger calls a standing reserve, which is this realm of pure potentiality again.
Right.
And so the Platonists look at the world of forms, the world of pure potential as kind of like the idea, like the true reality, and then the material realm as kind of like a fallen shadow of the true form. And now we're kind of going full circle where mankind is trying to transform the entire physical world back into the world of forms, back into a world of pure potential. And part of the spiritual pattern we're seeing is like this turning away from the world. Like it's a Gnostic pattern, right? That the material world is fallen and it's evil, and there is this purer form that eventually we're destined to return to. And it's very anti-Christian.
Yeah, and well, that's what you're describing there. That's ether as well.
Yeah.
Who is it? Someone in the chat said, Paul E said, don't forget ROTC. Well, I kind of did reference ROTC because their interpretation of the concert was that it's just, there's no symbolism that's occurring. And if there is symbolism that's occurring, it doesn't matter. It's just people being edgy. And ultimately it's like, they don't believe that symbols will actually influence or conjure reality in any sort of way. Which is also like, I suspect that like the reason that they no longer engaged with my last video that I had sent them, which wasn't even like, I could understand if I sent them a video and it was really bad, it sucked, but I don't think this was the case. There are worse videos that I sent them. This one was at least average from what I send them, and they didn't even view it. And that happened after I asked Alex Jones the question about symbolism on their show. So I think that they really don't believe in any of that stuff. They're really apprehensive to engage in it for whatever reason. And so anyway, they don't think that there's anything like spiritual or weird going on with the concert. And I think
for people who are skeptical about that stuff, try watching a music video from the 80s and a music video from the 2010s.
Right.
And if they give you a completely different mood, a completely different aesthetic experience, you're experiencing symbolism firsthand.
Yes. Yeah. And again, I think that it's not that they would ignore the sort of psychological effects of symbolism, and they might have a basic understanding of like archetypes and everything, but as soon as it gets into the spiritual end of things, they're disinterested. But it makes me really appreciate how you and I have approached these topics is like, I like that we started with philosophy. We started with philosophy and then made our way to reality, as opposed to looking at the documents and then inferring motivations and belief out of that. Because it's so easy for us to look at, like, look, this is what the mystery schools have been teaching for hundreds of years, and how can you not see that that's exactly what it is that they're putting into these concerts, and and then how that eventually manifests into like the alchemical avatar man, Yeah, but yeah, so I kind of addressed the ROTC thing. And also, I can appreciate that with ROTC, like, they're a comedy show. It's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be like lighthearted. And what we're dealing with is something else here. So I can appreciate them dropping it.
I think we're funny too, though. Maybe not laugh out loud funny, but
yeah, we have our moments. But I am a little annoyed that they just like suddenly pretended that I no longer existed. And I found that that's kind of like a repeated cycle that occurs for me and larger creators. Like the first was Nick Fuentes. Okay. So I both become a part of Nick Fuentes' lore, and, his like inner circle and everyone, like, they all know who I am, and whatever. And then one day it's like he blocks me on Twitter. Which in a sense, it's like, who cares? But that was the first time that it's like, okay, a larger creator's trying to like go out of their way to turn their back on me. And I didn't even do anything like inflammatory or anything, right? That was the first. Revenge of the Cis is another, where it's like, there was a time where every week they would interact with my content and speak glowingly about me at times, and then suddenly it's like they're just gone. I'm just being ghosted by these people. And there's another too, a guy that I really respect, who is like, who invited me onto his live stream and everything, and then it's like, it's okay, are you available tomorrow? Yeah, I'm available tomorrow and everything, and then something comes up or whatever, and now it's just like, okay, well, I guess I just like don't exist anymore. So it's been weird. That's whatever. That's just me writing in my journal to you guys. Dear diary. Yeah. Owen Benjamin too. Jeez. Owen Benjamin. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, let's wrap it up here. Otherwise we could talk about this for a long time. So what I'm really looking for in making live stream content or making stuff is that I want it to be really, like, I've gone through the time where I put in way too much effort than any of this was worth, and like you have a background in graphic design, and you've been like formally trained on how to do a lot of these things. And for me, it was like I was figuring everything out from the ground up. That's why all the graphics that I use are like mostly done in Paint. And so there was a huge barrier of entry for me to get into, that I put in so much work into live streaming. And in some ways, I think that effort really paid off, because it's both so thoughtful, but also so like stupid and retarded that it almost makes it endearing. But I'm like done that, I'm done working that hard. I've got other things to focus on in my life, but I still want to make stuff, just as long as it doesn't have to take that much work.
Yep.
So every once in a while, I think we should, if we each have a topic, we should jump on and make a live stream. I do plan on making the free guy analysis, and that one, it's going to be well thought out, but it's not going to be like really necessarily high production quality. I also might make a video in defense of Notch very soon. Minecraft's creator, yeah.
Is this video also on BitChute or?
No, so I've tried to set it up so that BitChute automatically uploads.
Yeah.
But that isn't working. Like I have the tab selected and it's just not automatically carrying over. I find BitChute to be very unstable. I try and upload things on there and it just nothing happens, especially if something is like 2 hours long.
Yeah.
But I am finding a lot of success with Odyssey. Odyssey I really like.
Okay, yeah. Great, because my website, ironagearchive.com, recently, it now works with Odyssey videos as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to share a link to this on there. ironagearchive.com.
Yeah. I've got you. There's a footnote that says ironagearchive.com under your avatar here. Cinder Mountain Villager says that I should join on from time to time. I'm certainly willing to do that if it's a topic I feel I can contribute on. Yeah, so I'm uploading my archive onto Odyssey, and what I plan to do is catch up to the end of the Day of the Rake live streams, and then I plan to upload all of the Theory of Anything. And then I'm basically caught up. And then I'll probably do the same thing that I'm doing now, where I live stream on YouTube, and I might test with this. I might keep this one up for 24 hours and then immediately pull it, because again, it's too risky. We just talked about like the most taboo things that the World Health Organization won't tolerate. So, and then anything that's produced on a higher level, I do move that over to the Dust of Nations channel. Because that's where I do the stuff that's like safer. Yeah. Such a gong show. I should be able to just create a channel and just do it, but the machine won't let me. Mark Zuckerberg's Black Goo hates us.
Yeah.
The Canadian Anti-Hate Network is Black Goo, and it's also the Canadian Armed Forces. I part of me can't wait for Remembrance Day. So Canada Remembrance Day is coming up in 2 days. I kind of can't wait for it, just because I'm so infuriated and disgusted with like
identification,
that I can't wait to watch all these people who use
identification,
like try and virtue signal and like remember the sacrifices that they are squandering. Oh, I can't wait for the virtue signals. Anyway, I think that's as good a place as any to shut it down. Thanks for joining me, Jeff. That was a good one. Thanks for watching, guys. And yeah, we'll see you when we see you. Have a good one. This was so rusty.
It went pretty well, though.
I think so. It was okay. It was not as smooth as we used to. Yeah. You can tell because I even still have my mic on. Here we go.